All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this fireside chat with our special guest, Houston Goodwin. I was just explaining a little bit about our Ask an Exec series. This is where we try to give leaders of volunteer an opportunity to connect with executives in the volunteer engagement space to learn and understand how they think, ask them questions, and take away valuable lessons and nuggets that we can apply in our own organizations. So as we get started, um, if as you're joining in, please continue to drop in the chat your name, your the organization that you're in, title, and where in the country you are. A couple of weeks ago, it was like, what was the weather where you are? Um, just so that we have an idea of who is in the room. So it'll help us to inform the conversation that we're having today. Just a few housekeeping. Please note that all attendees are on mute. You can use the Q&A section or the chat box. I'll be looking at the chat box for questions. And or the Q&A section. It's probably easier to use the chat box. This session is being recorded, so afterwards we will stick it on the members only side of the website. So now I just want to go ahead and introduce our very, very special guest today. This is if you haven't had the opportunity to meet or interact, this is Houston Goodwin. He is the new CEO of Better Impact, and I'm just so excited to have him here with us. He is a leading volunteer. He Houston is the CEO of Better Impact, a leading volunteer management platform that has powered over 500 million hours of service worldwide. With a background in software leadership and private equity, Houston brings a fresh, data-informed perspective to the volunteer sector, championing the belief that volunteer leaders are strategic drivers of change, not just program coordinators. His mission is to help organizations transform how they recruit, engage, and report on impact and unlock the full potential of their volunteer efforts. So, Houston, without further ado, welcome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. Have the chat open as well. So one of the things, obviously, I know we'll do some Q&A and talks, but want to make sure we're really present for the people that are here live as well. So if you have any questions, I have this open on my screen as well. So we'll do the best to do this. But thank you. I'm excited. I love working with Alive. We've got to know each other over the last like almost year and a half, and I'm excited to do one of these.
Well, listen, you said if there's questions, I have plenty, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So,
Perfect.
first and foremost, Houston, um, as volunteer engagement managers, 98% of us do not quote me on that statistic, but there's a whole heap of us who, as little kids, were not, I want to be a volunteer engagement manager when I grow up. We all fell into this wonderful, phenomenal field that we call volunteer engagement. So we are curious, what was your journey? How did volunteer engagement find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a little bit of two tracks. One is like my introduction to volunteering, and the second is my introduction into where I fit into it, which is like the world of software and software being a catalyst for change. So I'll start with the software part first. I'll try to not be super long-winded, but over the last a little over a decade, I have been operating what we call vertical market software companies. So software companies that provide services to a very specific industry or a niche. And I did that as a part of a large Canadian conglomerate that owned hundreds and thousands of software companies in several different niches. And that's kind of where I grew up professionally. So it was really fun. A lot of really great lessons learned on the software business side of just how to run a business well, the leadership side, how to get buy-in and lead from not just from positional leadership, but by getting people bought into a vision and rowing in the same direction, seeing what they could do. And I was always drawn to community events. And so I was very community centered my whole career. So, as a quick example, one of the software companies that I was a part of, we sold to martial arts schools. So, we were like the number one provider of martial arts school software, which is like such an interesting small niche that I never would have found myself in. And one of the things that I really appreciated about the martial arts industry was if you talk to someone that is teaching like Taekwondo or karate, 98% of them, the reason they get into it is because of the confidence and the things that it gives the children of their community. So it's less about building up fighters. There are some of those, but a lot of it is, hey, I typically it was, I was a kid, I got into martial arts, it taught me self-confidence, it taught me structure, it gave me discipline, it gave me a family. I want to give that to my community. So I really like, one, impacting my own community where I live. That's very important to me. But two, that was like my first taste into the software company of, oh, I'm able to go and help people in communities all over the world make a bigger impact on their communities. So it's really cool to see that amplification through software. And so I spent, about a decade doing that at several different companies. And about 2 years ago, one of my good friends, actually he was my college roommate, and we had worked together for a long time, and we lived in the same city, and he had the similar like vision and mission as I did. We got together and said, "Hey, let's stop working in this big company for tons of different software companies, and let's go find something that we can devote the rest of our lives to." Like, we're in our early 30s, we have some working years ahead of us. We want to go make an impact at a sector that deserves, like, really deserves the best from software, the best from what it can unlock. And then also, we just want to do something that's quality of life for us, right? We both have young families. We put a lot of work in. So I want to be able to work somewhere where I feel good about the work, that we're accomplishing and the mission of the people that we're helping. And so we quit our jobs with no plan really as far as landing at Better Impact. And we spent 1 solid year talking with different founders and companies to see where we might be a good fit. And over that year, we connected with, over 400 founders. And one of those happened to be Tony Goodrow, who started Better Impact. And he was kind of looking for his transition out of the space into retirement. And for those of you who may know Tony, he's very culturally minded. He's very like the passing of the baton and seeing what he started grow and scale at a level that he always knew it could be was very important to him. So he spent a few months getting to know him, and we stepped in, and I stepped in as CEO a little under a year and a half ago here at Better Impact. And it's been fantastic. Like I said, I think that it's a merger of the last year. I've really been in listening mode. So if you're on this and you're a client, I haven't met you, I would love to meet you. I've done a lot of like listening tours and getting on the ground, boots on the ground, trying to see what problems really are existing for volunteer managers or managers or volunteers. Some of those problems have existed for 30 years, where I'm reading books from the 90s and they're this, very similar problems. And there are some problems that are new with generational shifts or political climate or technology, AI coming into the scene, a lot of startups, a lot of people not knowing where to put their trust. And the good news is, on the flip side, there are some really good um, companies we can look at who have used software in a sustainable, healthy way to be a catalyst for change for deserving like industries. So I'm really excited to kind of merge those two. Like I said, I've been listening a ton before we come out and say, "Hey, this is what you should be doing." But I see so much potential with the software to be a tool to amplify the work that you guys are doing. I like to say we want to be behind the people who are behind their communities. Like, we don't want to come do your job. We can't replace all the great work that volunteer like coordinators and leaders of volunteers are doing. We want to be behind you and have your back and be able to take you into that next level and remove a lot of the friction through the use of technology and also just a collection of the data and best practices.
So when you had an opportunity well, thank you for sharing all that. That's fascinating. Love it. When you had an opportunity to talk with Tony, like what about it? What about the conversation with him? Like you said, it was over 400, different opportunities. What is it that connected for you? Because for us, we know volunteer engagement is very like being in community and all of
Hmm.
those things are just so like, did you have like like, because we talked to some people and they're like, well, my mom was a volunteer and I grew up,
Yeah.
with that volunteer, it was in our house. It was just something that we always did. What is it about? Because there's so many other industries out there. What is it
Hmm.
that when you were talking to Tony and you heard about what it is that he's doing that you were like, this is the one?
Yeah. So a couple things. One, on a like company culture side, like one of the reasons I believe I'm on this earth is I think giving people a great place to work is one of the best things you can do for them. And some people say work family. I'm not really family because you don't stop working with your family, right? It's typically like that's not the best, not my favorite analogy, but I use community a lot for the analogy because the people you work with are really a major community in your life. You spend a lot of waking hours with them, you get to know them. Life's too short to work and spend that much time with a community that you don't get any satisfaction from and is like a not a great place to work. So I'm very passionate for like employee health and providing a great place to work. One of the best ways to do that is tying the work you do to something meaningful. So that kind of narrowed down the focus a lot to is this a sector that's meaningful? Diving into the issues that Better Impact is solving and attempting to solve and coming in with some fresh eyes, so like not being in the industry, I was blown away by the mission criticality of volunteerism in communities. How much of society is led and held up by the work that volunteers do. And largely that goes unseen. And there seemed to be this really big disconnect between the people funding the organizations and the executive leadership of the organizations and the work actually being done through the volunteer department. And when I've met with both sides, the best way I'm describing it internally right now is it seems sometimes like people are speaking separate languages. So they're saying similar things with similar goals, but they're not able to like get in sync and in lockstep. And so I really appreciated the opportunity to come in and help see how we can use the data and technology to do this impact reporting, which is a mixture of the qualitative and the quantitative to say like, hey, let's be the single like language that both sides can use so we can get people appropriately resourced. And that was the most exciting thing for me at Better Impact is because I could spend the rest of my life using all of my brain power and all of my experience up to this point and all the help I can get to try to get appropriate resources to the people who are showing up for their communities through leading volunteers and the volunteers themselves. And I think that's a really cool, worthwhile effort. And I think there's a long way to go. And I'm personally like really excited by that. I was reading article Double the Donation posted out. I was on one of their webinars where it was like less than 0.2% of funding goes to the volunteer engagement for nonprofits. And I'm looking at that and I'm looking at what actually happens in these volunteer departments. And I'm looking at our hundreds of millions of hours and millions of active volunteers and hundreds of thousands of opportunities. And I'm saying this doesn't match, right? We want to see that increase. And it's not even increasing in ask. The way I'm phrasing it is like it's the like let's just proportionally and appropriately fund these people doing the work. And what parts can we play? And then what parts do we partner with like Alive? We talked about this a lot, Nicole. Like we're not consultants. We're never going to come in and say, this is how you should do your like this is why we have great consultants we work with, we have great organizations we work with. But from the reporting data benchmarking, which really doesn't exist right now in the industry for like how do we know if you're doing a good or where you're doing a good job and where you have a lot of areas for like opportunities or areas of improvement? If we don't have benchmarking, we don't know, right? If you put me in a random software company and showed me the sales numbers, I could tell you based off of industry benchmarks where the salespeople are doing really good and where they have a lot of areas for opportunity. A lot of volunteer coordinators that talk about they're doing fantastic in areas, and when I tell them that, it's like reassurance, but they don't have the numbers to be like, oh yes, my retention is great compared to the industry standard, or my recruitment is fantastic, or my, how I'm stretching these dollars is in the top 10% of volunteer coordinators in similar positions around the country. That's all
Right.
data that we have that we want to bring to show
Yeah,
you where you should be focusing and where you're doing a great job. And maybe you could take that and teach others that are maybe struggling in those areas, which is really
exactly.
exciting.
Yeah, I love all of those things, and you are preaching to the choir here. I mean, I'm sure everybody's like, "Whoa, yeah!" Somebody's saying it. Um, so one of the things that was really important for me to have this conversation with you is because a lot of people, as you know, Tony was a staple in this organization for so long and has built so much trust, and and I've had conversations with Tony where he speaks highly of you all and put a lot of trust in that transition as well. Um, And so I just wanted at least our members to have that opportunity to kind of hear, because, it was like Tony was here and then he was gone and then you were here. And it's kind of like, and with change, it can be very scary. We don't know you coming in. We don't know who you are. And so I just thought it was important that we had that, because Alive and Better Impact have had a long-standing relationship.
Mhm.
Gretchen and Tony were, old buddies and pals, and just to see where they planted seeds and how the relationship has grown over the past, like, more than a decade, it's just been amazing to see that, it just starts with a dream, it starts with a thought, and if it's just watered and taken care of, to see how it can grow. Um, so speaking of growing, I'm going to ask you kind of like one other question, but and I have several, but thinking off the top of my head, what was your most impactful volunteer experience?
Definitely the most impactful volunteer experience that I've had recently was not me volunteering. I have some stories that I could share and go through that, especially being younger. But crazy season of life, buying a company, stepping in as a stranger. My A little backstory: I have an 18-month-old son. He turns 18 months this week. Um, we officially signed the papers with Better Impact as like a it's called a letter of intent on a Friday after a lot of work. On Monday, my son was born 3.5 weeks early. I was actually supposed to be in
Oh.
Canada meeting Tony for the first time in person, and through some providence, we had some unnecessary things come up that made us have a doctor's appointment on Monday, and my wife went into labor spontaneously almost 4 weeks early. And so really crazy start to this journey. It's really cool. Like my son is like essentially the age of my time with Better Impact, which is fun to look back on and see him growing as my thing grows. But I'm a very type A, I think is the right way to describe it, personality. I like to have data to make decisions in data. And long story short, I spent a week in the NICU. It was open air NICU, like not a big deal, but someone needed to feed my son every 2 hours. I slept one shift over the week and missed it, and the nurse did a bad job because it was like we needed, a certain amount of like him to ingest a certain amount. So that whole week I was up every 2 hours with him. I didn't leave the room. NICU rooms are not set up for parents, so I got the little couch. I was separated from my wife, and I was in uh sleep deprived and just in like trying to collect as much data as possible, look at all the monitors, learn all the things they're looking for, and then anyway, I could go into it, but it was a very stressful season of life. And there were volunteers there, and they did things like knitted hats, and brought hats in for the babies. But part of it too was just to sit and talk. And so, the nurses, they're busy. There's other babies. It was a very like high level NICU. So there's other babies they're giving more attention to because my son was like almost 9 pounds when he was born a month early. So he didn't look like a NICU baby. Um, but I'll never forget. I was like, I'm entering the volunteerism space. I'm freaking out in the hospital. Like, my mind is fried. I haven't slept. And a volunteer came and saw me and could see probably that I was frazzled. And they did photo shoots for the babies in the NICU. And so they came, they scheduled a photo shoot. But after the photo shoot, I think she could tell that I was like reading the beeps and trying to talk to the nurses. And she just sat with me for a couple of hours and just like normalized the experience a bit, kind of like opened my eyes to like more empathy towards parents that are going through like longer NICU stays where, I never even thought about that before, like, maybe spending 2 months in the NICU and what do you do with your job at that point and how do you get back and forth? And there's a lot of volunteers that help do the pictures and do drives and things like that. And so it was like really cool timing from that perspective that hit home because I was just like on the work side of my brain, which was turned off primarily, like preparing now to enter the space with volunteerism. Like we had to do some diligence and stuff. But that interaction with the volunteer was like so meaningful for such a crazy part of life, but also so exciting because I was like, these are the people that I'm about to go try to help, which was really cool. And so now Brenner's Children's Hospital is actually a client of ours at Better Impact, which is really cool since we took over. We do a lot of work with the Ronald McDonald House and some of the people that are helping with that. So that's like a new soft spot for me as parents going through stressful situations. And you don't want like meals to be a stress when you have kids at home and kids in the NICU. Like we had a pretty easy ride, and I was still like didn't handle it probably as well as couldn't imagine some people that do it. And so yeah, that was a really meaningful timing for me in my life, and something that obviously will stick with me forever. And I have the pictures, and they're adorable, and that's always a good reminder for us as well.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And that fuels everything that we do. It's
Yeah,
those moments, it's those things, and it's like, yes, the data is important and all these things are especially like if we're looking for funders and things like that. Yes, we need the data and yes, we need these, but it's like the data does not tell that. And that is
yeah.
why we do what we do. That is how we are changing our communities one person, one baby at a time. Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay. I'm gonna move it on because I'm gonna start thinking about NICU babies and my mascara is gonna run. So
Yeah, 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 yeah.
let's think about this. So one of the great things that I love of like with you coming into this space is that you are bringing a fresh new perspective, right? A lot of people have been in this industry for a very, very long time. We know a lot of the things that are going on. And that can be our blessing, but it can also be our curse. So, coming into this with fresh eyes, as you've spent time listening and learning and in the volunteer engagement community, from a leadership and systems perspective, where do you see the biggest opportunity for volunteer engagement professionals to elevate their impact?
I think it's this mirroring of what I'm calling like impact metrics, which is that qualitative versus quantitative. Because the truth is, numbers are cold, so we can't just say like here are the numbers. But on the flip side, stories are great, but if they're not put into perspective with data, they don't hold the weight that they deserve. And so one of the things, as I'm meeting with volunteer coordinators, one of the things that like the plumb lines I've been going with is like it's not just about the good intentions. It's also about the outcomes, and those outcomes require systems to like calculate and show those outcomes. And so I think talking to a lot of volunteer coordinators, they're doing the hard work. Like all of the hard problems that need to be solved, they like have set up. It's the move towards strategic leadership. So one thing that I've heard a lot I can empathize with is we want volunteerism to be seen as a strategic arm of the organizations that they're a part of, which is
Mhm.
so true because strategic arms get funding. Um, but one of the things I was just at, I saw a couple people in here. I think a couple were at the MAVA event. I did a talk on like strategic leadership, and
Mhm.
strategic leadership is something that I've been traveling and talking on and learning and being coached on and it's been a big part of my life for the last decade or so. And there's about 90% overlap where there's the 10% that is very unique to the industry of like managing volunteers. But the themes of strategic leadership, I think, is a big area where I feel like most like just thinking through conversations that I've had volunteer coordinators would really benefit from. And these are the areas that we're trying to stay in our lane, where it's like it's the 90% overlap, not the 10%. So there's 10%, and maybe that's a broad brush. So sometimes it's 50-50. Sometimes there's that you have to be in this organization, in this industry for a decade to really understand the problem and as depth as you need to be able to solve this thing. But there's the 80% over here where it's just like, how do I lead not from title? Because the truth is, if you're leading volunteers, you're not their boss. You can't make them come in. So like, how do you lead in a way just from the gravitas of what you're saying? So this is very common and a very common playbook in like B2B SaaS companies, which is how do you lead people without the title? Like, how do you lead people maybe not in your department towards an initiative? And there's a lot of ways that you can do that. And with volunteer coordinators, a lot of them are doing it inherently. I always say before I got into sales, I was a server. So I was, all through college, I was like a server at a Red Lobster for like almost 5 years. And then when I got into sales and I started getting into sales training and personality types and how to talk to people, I was like, oh, I instinctively know a lot of this because I was a server for 5 years. Now I just have words to put with it, so it's easier for me to collect my thoughts and get clear and know where I need to go. And a lot of conversations I've had with volunteer coordinators, it's not like novel ideas that they never heard of before. It's just putting words and systems to things that they inherently know because they've been in the trenches working And putting those words and systems into place and having a common language brings a lot of relief because now you can name what you're doing, you can name what you need to work on, and you can start adding KPIs and data to start tracking that. Right? It's one thing to be like, I struggle with volunteer retention. It's another thing to be like, well, what do you mean by volunteer retention? Because if you ask 10 people, they probably have 10 different answers. So what we are seeking to do with the scale that we have with, 30,000 or so organizations is defining what we mean by volunteer retention, what we mean by volunteer engagement. So that way we can all be speaking a common language. And when we do things, it's all fairness in the group. But one of the things we do as user groups, we have, 1,500 volunteer coordinators in some type of regularly meeting user groups. What we want to do is provide the dictionary and the language so that way, if you are in, you know, Banff, Canada, and you're a volunteer coordinator and you meet someone in, Washington or Florida, you're able to say the same things and talk the same metrics so you know and can kind of like benchmark off each other and say, oh, and Nicole's really good at this. Her retention is X. I want to get a one-on-one with Nicole to talk about what she's doing and how she's using her systems to see that improvement and vice versa. And right now, I think there's just a big disconnect in the industry because there isn't that universal language. So that's something that we're really um, working with the industry and with their clients to try to set and just say. And part of it is, and I love it, volunteer coordinators have some of the best hearts. And
Um,
setting that standard requires raising your hand and saying, "Hey, everyone, this is what we're going to mean from moving forward." And that can feel like not confrontational, but it is like kind of putting yourself out there a little bit to say like, hey guys, let's follow this. So that's where we're trying to like say, where can we with our data say you can calculate retention anytime, any way you want. But when we're meeting as a user group or when we're doing this training, this is what we mean. And you should calculate your retention this way so that we can compare apples to apples with your peers and we can find out who's excelling and who's hurting and we can collectively come together as a community to like build each other up.
And I love everything about that because getting shared language is important. It's one of the reasons why Alive, was working to with the Department of Labor to get a classification as a profession so that, if we have a job code, then at least it's level setting because the same thing you just said with volunteer retention just in general. Like you could go to so many organizations where volunteer coordinators, or the community engagement person, or volunteer manager, director, like there's all kinds of different names. So even if it makes even at the base level, it makes looking for a job difficult because you could put one thing in and
Exactly.
every organization calls it something completely different. So getting
Exactly.
that shared language and getting everybody on the same page, it's really nice to hear that you all are working on that because we're working on it from the top and you're working on it from here. We're going to meet together in the middle. It's
Yeah.
going to be amazing. Amazing. Okay.
And it's going to require the buy-in from everyone, right? So that's why it's important to like that's why we've been on a listening tour before we do this. Like 2026, we have some big stuff coming out. Part of this too is changing from a smaller founder-led company, which is really good and very hard. And that's like it takes people like a Tony who like spends so much time in the industry and saying like, hey, we're at this size and we can do this. The next step, which is why we were brought in, is to say, okay, let's take and build off of that foundation, but let's scale, not scale so that we can have a big company, but the scale is what is required for us to be able to set those standards to the industry, to the execs. Someone posted in the chat, like communicating that data is important. That's another thing we want to be able to do. And I'm excited to talk about the AI, like some AI stuff as well. Like it's literally mad. It's coming. What's coming out is magic. And what we want to do is not only give you the reports, but then what do you do with the reports?
Mm-hmm.
Do you email it to your boss? How do you communicate this with confidence? And so you have to have a deep understanding yourself so that way you can go and if you get off script a little bit because they asked a question that you weren't anticipating, if you don't actually know the numbers and the data that you're talking about and you're just presenting it on a script, that's not going to be super helpful. You get flustered or you get off track, you can't answer a question. We want to empower people with education to learn this, to treat this as a strategic piece of the business, which is part of the strategic leadership. So that way when they go to the board's like, who is this person talking? I've never heard this confidence before. Like they understand their numbers better than the development team or better than these other people that we easily see as strategic. we need to start looking at this differently because they have a goal, they know where they're going, and we want to get stuff out of their way so they can accomplish it because it's a really good future for everyone.
I love that. Let me ask you this. I love, like you said, like the idea that you're taking it from kind of like founder led and wanting to expand and grow. Um, for I know the volunteer engagement community is very tight knit and it's very niche. So we all know each other, it's very um it's a very, very like tight community. And so what do you say to somebody who, if they hear like, if, because Better Impact has always had that kind of like you said earlier, like, but almost like that family feel, right? Like it's smaller, it's more connected, we're in this together. So, what do you say to somebody who hears, oh, we want to expand it and have greater impact? Like, and maybe the first thing they think is, well, it's going to lose that. I'm going to use hometown feel, so to speak, right? And like,
Sure.
or, if we're like this small community and all of a sudden now, they're tearing down
Yeah.
buildings and parking lots are going up. Like, how are
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
all gonna, what do you say to somebody who might be thinking of like, oh gosh, that expanding is great, but where we have been, are we going to lose that community tight knit feel?
Yeah, sure. So, a couple things on that. One, the way I would see that community feel is always staying in a niche. So like staying in an industry. So like volunteer coordinators are always going to be a community. The truth is, it's not that small of a community. There's 75 million volunteers in the US alone at the last data. The
Hmm.
community feels small sometimes because a very small proportion of people are connected to great things like Alive or Points of Light or these industries. There are tens of thousands of people with no peer-to-peer communication, with no help that is literally on an island. And because there isn't that shared language, what happens is they leave the organization and the organization starts over.
Yep.
And this is why we're seeing from 30 years ago similar problems persisting.
Hmm.
There's now a new external pressure on the industry, which is generational shifts.
Hmm.
Gen Z is very different than baby boomers and how they want. They're very cause focused. They are not going to put up with anything other than world class tech. Like they're not like the barrier to entry and the ability to be able to provide an experience through technology is becoming more and more of a requirement, and there are more and more pressures. So when we say scaling, it's not losing the connection with our clients. It means being able to invest more in our clients. I'll give you some examples. The difference between a 20-person company and a 100-person company in a space like this is having a 25-person support team, like all of our support staff, Karen's in here, almost exclusively every customer facing person came from the industry and was a client first, and then became a part of Better Impact to increase the mission. Like that's a commitment of ours to continue to provide service. But also there are some things, if you look at our users that they make great suggestions of features that we should be putting out, et cetera. If you have a tech team of 4 people trying to hold down this thing for, 20,000 organizations, the speed at which we can iterate and come out with things to be actually helpful is significantly slower than if we have a team of 30 people that we can invest in. Like, for instance, a proper product team that is meeting with customers and building out product, a proper UX designer that is looking at the look and feel of the product and how we want to go. And so,
When you say explain what UX is, because not
sorry,
everybody may know.
user experience. So like how the buttons are shaped, where they go, what make like I want to know, like let's say Nicole, you're a user of the software. I want to sit with you for an hour and watch you use the software and see what takes you 10 minutes that should take you 30 seconds because you have this really unique use case and you've created this workaround. And so all of this is in an effort to support. The next thing too is at scale what we want to do, and you see this with like the Benevities of the world, the Blackbods, like they're very donor focused and they've I think lost some of that hometown feel, but they're able on the donor side to make big pushes from on a government level sometimes for like fundraising and how things go. We want volunteerism to have a voice at any stage that is applicable to say this is why more funds need to come to this department. This is why this is a strategic part of the world, and the world is held up on that. And part of it is I just don't think coming from the outside, I just don't think that a lot of people have a clear understanding of just how much they rely on volunteers. It's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like when you buy a red car, you see red cars everywhere. Now that I'm
Mm-hmm.
in this, I see volunteers everywhere that I would have walked past and not seen
Yep.
5 years ago.
Yep.
I just went to the North Carolina aquarium with my son
Yep.
and my brother and his daughter, and there's volunteers everywhere with volunteer buttons. And I was like,
Everywhere.
"Hey, look, that's a volunteer!" And I
Everywhere.
went and talked to them and like shook their hand
Yeah.
and got their experiences. But like a vast majority of people they wouldn't even see that as a volunteer. They don't even appreciate how mission critical volunteerism is to their life and
Yep.
to their community.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
that's really what we're trying to change. And then also, we're always open to feedback. I told you I was almost late to this call because I got a call to my personal cell phone and it was a client with a question about invoicing. Now, am I the best person to answer that question? Probably not, but my phone number is everywhere. It's in my email signature. It's on all the it's on all the like welcome emails we send. Like I'm very reachable. And I'm
Yeah.
always happy to like take the call and I'll work with him to get it sorted. And so part of it is just keeping that in the culture of like this isn't a business. Um, where scale means to grow $1 billion company and go public and be like Facebook. Like there's plenty other industries to do that like faster and better. It's we see the problem. We think this moment deserves the appropriate attention, and we can't do that with 20 staff members because there's the need will continue to persist.
And I love what you said, right? Because you see volunteers everywhere. And even for me, like one more step, and the more, like once you realize that volunteers are everywhere, that also signals that there's a volunteer, there's a leader of volunteers, a volunteer manager, even more hidden, right? Because before, if you
Yep.
didn't realize, and now you're open to the volunteers, well, they didn't just get there by themselves. They didn't just know the
Right.
role by themselves. So every volunteer you see accentuates and is an exclamation point that there is another volunteer manager out there as well.
100%.
Um, so, um, so you said, I love what you said too. You're like, I want to sit with somebody for an hour, and if something took you like 10 minutes and should take 30 seconds, right? So, a lot of volunteer leaders are under pressure to show impact with limited time and resources. How do you see technology making that easier and more meaningful? So, for example, I think somebody had put it in the chat, and I think it was Belinda, like, is better impact more open to customization? Like, are those the types of things that can help that would um, help like volunteer managers in general? Like, because we're having to do a lot. Well, I mean, I guess that's everybody doing more with less, but even more pressure, as you had talked about earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, customization is a scary word, so just defining what that means and doesn't mean. Feel more custom to you because we're coming out with more features like specifically made for volunteer coordinators, yes. Customizing separate instances, like building a specific feature for one client, like no. And the reason that we are not doing that is because we want to rising tide lifts all ships. And like and so we want to build things out that is largely valuable to everyone, where companies don't do service to anyone is they end up having 1,000 different instances of their software for 1,000 different unique clients. And then when one thing breaks, it takes you 2 months to figure out why it's broken and things go down. But yes, the feel of customization is coming. The speed at which we release is coming. Better Impact historically was doing 1 or 2 releases a year. We're looking to do 1 or 2 releases a month. Like so the speed to be more efficient. And then part of it is coaching how to adopt technology. The good news is the playbook has been set. This isn't the first laggard industry that has not been adopting technology well, start to adopt technology. There's a lot of best practices, a lot of trial and error that's already happened. And so everything from those reportings, like reporting dashboards, like showing you how to report and create and circulate a deck or some type of report to your executive team in a format um, that they need is something coming down the pipe. We just did a internal training with some Karen led it with our CFO on how to build those custom reports out through a separate software called Power BI because we had a few clients that were in Power BI, which is a Microsoft thing. So we created a whole dashboard for volunteer department that feeds from our software into Power BI because that's like the model that their organizations use. And we just did like a 4-part training on that. We're going to be working on consolidating our data layer to bring those benchmarking standards to the whole industry, to benefit the whole industry, whether you're a Better Impact client or not. The only thing that we'll have to conform to is we're going to define what we mean by like retention rates, by engagement scores, by things like that. Once everyone's settled on those definitions, you'll be able to benefit from those benchmarking reports that we put out, regardless of if you're a better impact client. So we just want to see the industry grow. And then part of it is utilizing technology. Um, One of the strategic leadership principles we talk about is what can you delegate to others? A lot of people are teams of one. So one thing that we're coming out with is volunteer profiles to help. Gen Z likes high skill volunteering. If you need help with marketing, your department, we want to be able to equip you with the ability to get volunteers to raise their hand who have marketing degrees. If you need help with taking your data and putting it in a pretty presentation, we want the person in college that's doing that is living in PowerPoint to be able to say, yes, I could take your raw data and in 10 minutes I can make this for you. So we want you to be able to delegate through strategic leadership, not by hiring employees. If you need help messaging people, doing email comms, writing copy for emails. There is someone in your community that would be more happy helping you write those emails than any other volunteer job that you have to offer because they like high skill. We're going to be equipping you with the ability to do that through technology and connecting you with those volunteers in a meaningful way. The next is eliminate. So what are you doing that you don't need to do? And then on the third one is automate. What are you doing that's a repetitive task that technology can do for you just as good? And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be coming out with technology and tools to help you figure out where you can delegate and how we can empower you to delegate to volunteers, what you could eliminate, so any tasks that you're doing that don't need to be done, and what you could automate through our technology, whether that's running a weekly report, a quarterly report, email chains. We're coming out like scheduled emails we're launching like next week. We're going to be really investing in our communications for our clients. And so yeah, we want to have technology should be a tool that is easy and intuitive to use to make you 10 times more effective at your job.
So I love that you said delegate. My good friend Angela is here. We actually do a session together talking about delegating. So like we are all about that. We have about 15 minutes left. I could ask questions for all day, but are there questions from the audience? Anything in particular that you would like to ask Houston? Because I still have like two or three, but I want you all to have an opportunity to ask him. You can drop it in the chat. I'll give it a couple of moments. Um, let's see.
Oh,
Okay,
there are
really
questions
good
in the
question.
questions as well.
Oh, okay. So how about I'll go over and look at those. There's one right here, AI, friend or foe, how to balance the positive use of it with any negatives of it using resources. Using resources, like any negatives of it, like using resources, electricity, like that types of thing. Like what are your thoughts behind that?
Yeah, I'm probably not going to get too much into that. Just on the like resource electricity, I'm just uneducated on the cost of it. I think that AI is here to stay. So like whatever you think on the like electricity consumption side and the greenness of it, I think it's just a personal thing that you have to wrestle with. I think that there's a lot of really great applications to help build communities. That's what I'm focused on, is build it. How do we build communities more effectively? How do we get communities communicating better with one another? I think that doing work alongside your neighbors in a physical act is healing for communities in a climate where a lot of people don't have great opinions online about their neighbors. I think that this is something that is so important to me. And so the way I look at AI is I think it can be overhyped. I think it can be oversold. I think there are a lot of really good, interesting use cases that are helpful. And I want to do everything I can to use it as a tool for me, my staff, and our customers, all with the end goal of how do we build communities together. I personally have not done enough like research on the electricity usage of it and like the impacts of that to like have an opinion to give.
Okay, so I did see there are a couple in the question and answer, so I'm gonna try and do like short fire, like bam, 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 if you can do
Yeah.
quick answers for, because I really want to try to get to all of them. Sarah Sukram says, speaking of efficiency, is there a way to get some of the aspects of better impact at the enterprise level be done for several sub accounts versus having to go into each sub account and manually add things in?
Yeah, I would say Karen's in the chat. Let's take that offline as like a technical thing. We're really working on how we do that for our enterprise customers at scale to make it easier so it's not repetitive task. And so we have a brand new like CPO, so Chief Product Officer that's over that. We're really looking into the candy suggestions. And like I said, we've more than doubled the size of our product and dev team over the last 12 months, and we're going to be doing faster releases. And so make sure that we get that in the team.
So for Karen, I know Karen is in here. Drop your information. If you all have like technical questions for a better impact, I know they are very, very happy to answer. And Karen, we can make sure that Karen gets those answers and you can get those specific answers too. So I'm going to go through if they're specific technical,
Yeah.
hit Karen up. Let me see. Um, Jared asks, how do we get the industry standards and compare to theirs? That was earlier.
Yeah, so we're working on like creating a map for industry standards. We're working alongside Points of Light and some other larger publications as well to use our data to come up with those industry standards. So that's not something that's like publicly available at the moment, but that's something we're actively running towards. How do we use our data? Who are we working with to partner with us to bring these to light? So more on that to come, and we'll have that out as soon as possible.
Excellent. Erica asks, what volunteer engagement or management trends are shaping the future of better impact product in the coming years? Good question.
Um, Yeah, it's really great. So we're meeting with a lot of clients. Everyone kind of, again, it's like what you said, Nicole. Not only is the job descriptions, if you want to be like volunteer coordinator and engagement manager, not only are the job descriptions all over the place, but the training and the standards that they're held to and how they accomplish it, they are also all over the place because there's not like a universal like training guide on how to run volunteers. So everyone has organically kind of found these like really unique and individualized ways to find success and find struggles in parts. And so over the last year, we've been deeply in listening mode. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to culminate all of the best practices from everyone we've talked to, into a standard is something we're calling strategic impacts, which we'll be rolling out later this year, which is a framework from start to finish for everything from recruitment, engagement, reporting, the people side of things. And it will be a framework that allows people to see, um, for like brand new volunteer coordinators, the thesis would be they could literally take this out of the box and implement it, and they would have a pretty strong framework. For people who've been in the industry for a long time, they can take pieces of it. So it's like, hey, I'm really good at recruitment, but I'm really like struggling on the engagement or the retention. And so they can just kind of like piecemeal it together out of the box. So one of the things that we're trying to do is not reinvent the wheel, not create anything, but take all the successes that we're seeing from everyone and then kind of standardize that, roll that out as a free gift to the market, and then have our software adapt to those styles. So if you see something where it's like, here's how we suggest if you're struggling with engagement, try X, Y, and Z, and then it's also built into our software. So our software is a seamless tool, where everyone in the industry would have access to the ideas we have, and then our users would have, you know, a second level deep, which is now I have software that is in lockstep with these philosophies, and I can use this software. Someone asked, like, how do we keep up with technology because it's changing all the time. We Another thing we've done is doubled our marketing department, and so we're working on a great customer comm strategy this year to make sure that we're giving you guys in like newsletter form snippets to keep you informed of the changing landscape. And the answer is it just consumes a majority of my waking hours when I'm not with my family is keeping up with tech and talking with people and being in these groups. And then we have a good team that is equally doing that as well to be on the front lines and then distill that information into a useful information for you guys.
One small thing I would throw out there with that is you're right. Technology is changing all the time. By the time you blink, it's something else. So I would say like think of one that really affects you and impacts you and follow that trend. And then especially if you're like a volunteer manager, create a committee of tech people who are staying on top of that stuff and bringing it to you. Get a really great intern coming out of college, having them sit, because then this way it helps you to stay on top of things, but you don't necessarily have to be doing all of
Yeah.
it. But it can be filtered, and you stay on top of the one that is really benefit. Listen, I don't even like to do phone updates, but we're not going to talk about that. But find out the one or two, and then
Mhm.
have delegate and get help to stay on top of the others because otherwise you're gonna be like
Yeah.
this. Um,
One of the most recent question, I have a really great example of. I was just talking to someone that said, "Can you expand on the eliminate part of delegate?" Part of this is like I call it interrogating reality. So like taking a second, get out of your business and work on the business, not in the business. One of the volunteer coordinators I was talking to recently, we were looking at her recruitment efforts. And one of the things she did is I can't remember, Saturday, she would go to the farmer's market to recruit for volunteers. And that involved, lugging a tent, setting it up, spending several hours in the sun, trying to like recruit volunteers for her cause. So we started diving into the data and saw like 90% of her recruitment, like that made it through onboarding came from her social media posts. That's where she was recruiting new volunteers. So we looked at it and said, okay, these are your better people. You're spending 5 hours a week lugging this tent out to the farmer's market and spending a ton of time sitting in the sun. It'd probably be better for you to spend 1 extra hour on social media in the air conditioned, comfort of your house and just eliminate the need to go to the farmer's market. If the only goal is recruitment, it's not like to be there for like that was the only goal of going to the farmer's market. And so we worked on that, and that's what we came up with. Is like let's interrogate reality. 5 hours of my week or someone's week is going and sweating at the farmer's market with this big tent. It's not actually producing any of the results that we were. That's the only goal for it is recruitment. It's not a major part of our recruitment. We could reallocate a tenth of that time for social media or some other purpose and get better results. And we could eliminate that like 5 hours. And so that's like an example of eliminating. It's just like, what are you doing that takes time? And when's the last time you like interrogated reality to say like, is this worth my time?
I love that. Interrogate reality. And speaking of reality and time, we have just a few minutes. I am excited because, as you all know, our summit is coming up. Better Impact will be there. So if you're going to be at the summit, make sure Karen's going to be there. They're going to have a user group, like come and talk. They're going to have a booth there. So you can find out more information as well. Again, Karen will drop her information in here like 100 times. Please reach out to her. She is phenomenal, fabulous, and like her whole job is to it exists to help you and answer the questions that you have, like from technical questions for the software. So definitely reach out to her. The last question that I have to wrap the whole thing up is looking ahead. What is one thing in particular, specifically for Alive? And there may not be one, but we feel like we're special. So I just want to put it out there that Alive members and volunteers, because all of our volunteers use a Better Impact and they log and track their hours in Better Impact. So I just thought it was really great that they had an opportunity to talk to the person who, is influencing their lives. But what is one thing that Alive members and volunteers can be most excited about when it comes to Better Impact's future and connection to the volunteer community and like even and yeah, just that.
Um, there is some stuff to be really excited about that we'll leave on a cliffhanger that we will be able to talk about at the event. And so it's some really cool stuff. What I can say, and I don't want to say this is what you should be excited about because I don't want to sound self-serving, but one thing that I think is important and is unique, and one of the reasons why we like gathering in person, we have some big goals at Better Impact, and hopefully, part of the reason I'm being on this listening tour and trying to make myself available as much as possible is to show like, hey, like like we want canaries in the coal mine, like calling us out if our heart isn't in the right place. Like we want to grow responsibly, sustainably, but we do want to scale and grow, not for like greed, but because we want to make the impact that the volunteer coordinators deserve. We want to be able to support them in the ways that they haven't been supported in the past. We want to bring some of these industry shaping things to light. And so one of the things that I would say is spend time with us at the conference. Like our undivided attention is to be there to meet either users of the software or people just in the field to hear what your pain points are. I didn't design the software, so if you don't like the software for X, Y, and Z, come tell me why you don't like the software for X, Y, Z. It's not going to hurt my feelings. What we want to do is we want to shape the future together. We don't want to build it in a bubble. We want to be very iterative. We don't want to create a solution and go search for a problem. We want to know what the real problems the industry's facing are. And it's one of the reasons we're excited to come to these events is is to meet people who are using the software or have unique perspectives that we don't, who are in the trenches and saying, here's where I'm tired, here's where I'm struggling, here's where I could use some help. Because there are so many areas in which technology can be a catalyst for change for your organization, and for the world's view on volunteerism. And that's really how we view it. And so one thing I always tell people, we're directionally focused, not destination focused. There's nothing you can do today to change where you're at, but there's a lot you can do today to change the direction in which you're headed. And if you're headed in the right direction, you'll eventually get to where you want to go. It's just the delta is how much time it's going to take. So we want to be directionally focused and moving towards this to get the on the world stage, volunteerism seen in an appropriate light, where it's funded appropriately, where it's resourced appropriately, and where it's seen as a strategic element of these organizations because it is. And we're excited to build that future together with our clients and non-clients and people in the industry. And that is why we're at these events, is to get on the ground floor and hear. So if you are like, your family is tired of hearing about your struggles or the things that keep you up at night, and you don't have enough people to talk about, our undivided attention is learning and being interested in that in a genuine fashion. That's why we're doing this. So we're excited to meet everyone.
I will also say, be careful what you ask for there, Houston. We have like 30 years pent up of things. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Thank you, Houston. Everybody, please give a round of applause. Give a hand, the hand emoji, whatever. Houston, thank you so, so much for joining us and in being vulnerable and sharing your heart and where like Better Impact is and what you all are looking for. For all of you all, in terms of the next Ask an Exec series, we will let you know they come as necessary. And I just said series, and Siri just answered, so let me turn that off. But thank you all so much for spending this time with us. We really, really appreciate it. Reach out to Karen, reach out to Houston. That is that's what they're there for. And if you are going to Summit, we will see you soon in person. And thank you all so much. And I just want to encourage you all to continue to thrive with Alive. Talk to you later. Thank you. Bye bye.